is going on, RotoGrinders? Dean here, back at you. Another edition, NFL Pick 6 show, week 16. We're at the quarter pole, coming down the line, down the wire, talking some NFL DFS. There's still some money to be made. I know lots of people out there, maybe myself possibly, tilting some NBA basketball, which started this Wednesday night. And who knows, maybe you're listening to this on Thursday, and that's probably a silly thing to say. And maybe I came back and won. We don't know. Maybe you guys did as well. Forget basketball. We're talking about NFL Pick 6 show. Two of the best minds in all of fantasy football. Batting first, leading off. Rich, festive. Is it? What do we sell? Is this Festivus? Is this Christmas? Is this all encompassing? What's going on, dude?
Yeah, we do traditional Christmas around these parts. Yeah, you know, kids are all excited. Everyone's been home from school all week. It's been a grinding week, you know, week 16 of getting this content out with everyone, you know, kind of home, but we're making it happen. Excited that there's only kind of one like weird week left. And this is a weird week in itself with the one Friday game, the 3 Saturday games, and then the Sunday slate, which seems to be gutted by all good plays.
Can I be the first person to say that week 17 is an information slate? Am I first? It's an information slate. I know that's the thing that everybody says on week 17 because, you know, that's just kind of what we do in the industry. Hey, John, how about yourself? I have many airing grievances apparently clearly stocked up. I apologize for derailing the show. Let's keep it on task. Let's stay in my lane. John Daigle from Roto World Football. We excited as far as week 16. How are the season-long streaks going? How's the DFS streaks going for you?
I'm in the finals of the Roto World Friends and Family League that actually Reeves is in as well. It seems like a lot of people just punted that league this year because it was so crazy. Season long this year was not the best idea to try to tackle 10 plus leagues as we normally do in the industry. But yeah, everything's going well. If you had not already attacked Amazon to send gifts even 2 days, you can't do that anymore because I tried it this morning. So you're kind of just SOL right now. But a lot of things out of the way right now. Yeah, it's good. A winter coming in as well. I played winter golf this morning, which in Texas is 60 degrees still here, but that's a cold front coming in tomorrow. So it's going to get slightly worse for the holidays, but yeah, everything going well.
Glad to hear that. The formula, little bit different. You mentioned it's kind of a funky week, a little bit different this week. We're going to touch on the 3-game Saturday slate. Of course, that's Tampa at Detroit, San Fran at Arizona, Miami versus Vegas. And then we focus on two games instead of 3 because we can't go forever. 2 games in the main slate. We're going to talk about Atlanta, KC, Philadelphia, Dallas. Then we're going to bring it all back and talk about specifically the main slate. What quarterbacks we may have missed as far as, that didn't hit in the main games, what running backs, what receivers, and what tight ends. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of those for sure. We don't talk about Buffalo, New England, Tennessee, Green Bay is getting thrown out in the Thursday game. Minnesota
could have used Green Bay, Tennessee on the main slate.
Oh baby,
yeah. That would have been lovely. What come on, flex it back in, or was that flexed out, or I don't want to know. That they can only flex Sunday night. Is that what's going on?
It's the best game of the entire week, and we don't even get to it this week.
Yeah, that's a bummer. But it's showdown slate. It's going to be showdown season. That'll be good times for chase any sort of losings. If you happen to lose, in the off chance you happen to lose, you can chase that on Monday night. That'll be good times for sure. All right, so Rick, set the table as far as the Saturday slate, the 3-gamer: Tampa, Detroit, San Fran, Arizona, Miami, Vegas. Biggest team total. One of the biggest team totals on the board as far as the entire week. Tampa Bay at Detroit. Is that the first place we're starting? Are we starting with we going back to Leonard Fournette? Is like that one of the key pieces because he's still cheap and it's probably still his backfield, and we live with a salary cap, so I guess Fournette is one of our quote unquote least cash pieces.
We were robbed of the 3-game Thanksgiving slate due to COVID. Like many things this year, COVID touched and ruined it. But we do have, this 3-game slate. Next week we have a 3-game slate. In the first week of the playoffs, we'll have 2 separate 3-game slates because of the extra, playoff game this year in the first round. So we do have a lot of these mini, if everyone always loves Thanksgiving, it's like their favorite slate of the year. But so we're going to have a slew of these in a bunch of weeks in a row. But yeah, when you look at this game, especially if it would have been in the main slate, we would have probably talked about it given its total. The Lions are they are just bleeding out to end the season. They fired their head coach already. This defense is just a train wreck. They are currently right now allowing the most non-passing fantasy points per game to the opposition, 87.1 PPR points to divvy up to opponents per game. The opponents are scoring a touchdown on 78% of their scoring plays against Detroit. That's the highest rate in the league. So not only it's not a bend but don't break situation, it's a all pass go, collect $200 right to the end zone type of defense. And we've got this Buccaneers team. When you look at this slate, everyone is expensive. And so it's like really hard if this is a game you want to circle and say, yeah, I'm just going to load up on Buccaneers. It is very hard to do. Obviously, the guy that sticks out the most is like people are going to be drawn to is Leonard Fournette. He kind of got the backdoored his way into 2 1-yard touchdowns, guys getting tackled at the 1-yard line. He comes and cleanups the mess. But it was a stingy Atlanta defense that we've talked about multiple times on the show, and we'll probably talk about at some point during this show, that has been good against opposing backfields, good against the run. So, I mean, for him to even suck out those 2 1-yard touchdowns was a positive. Now he gets a Detroit team that is allowing the most rushing touchdowns in the NFL. They've allowed 25 touchdowns to running backs, which is the most in the NFL. So green light again for old Uncle Lenny. But the passing game, I think, is more interesting because it's like the Rubik's Cube. We don't know who to ever play, but Tom Brady has been hot. It wasn't hot in the first half last week, but think about it. He threw for 390 yards, 20 plus fantasy points, had 2 guys tackled at the 1-yard line. That game could have been monstrous for Tom Brady. He's now thrown multiple passing touchdowns in 5 straight. He's over 8 yards per pass attempt in his past 3. And not only is Detroit terrible against the run, they're completely horrendous against the pass. 31st in passing points allowed per pass attempt. They've allowed 3 or more passing touchdowns in 5 of their past 7 games. If you had Ryan Tannehill last week, you enjoyed the slew of fantasy points that you got. And then we just have to sort out who we want to play with them. But the Buccaneers are in a great spot to hit that high implied team total they have of over 30 points.
Can I ask, Bill, you mentioned Brady. Is he in the – so people talk about Mitch Trubisky, like roster him and just don't watch. And like it's normally going to be okay. Is Brady in that zone now? No?
I mean, this offense seems to go through definitely peaks and valleys, and they just look awful at times, and then there's times they look like they're a complete juggernaut. I'm very excited to see what we get from them in the postseason.
All right, what do you have for me there, Daigle? As far as the Bucks, they're pricey. Daigle's he's disappeared on us apparently. So, Rich, I'm going to stay with you. How about that by default?
Let's light it up.
Let me know when Daigle comes back, when he's good to go. Do we run it back as far as the other side, as far as Detroit? I assume Stafford's going to give it a go once again. He's a tough dude. By the way, I'm sure you saw it, that ridiculous no-look pass last week. I didn't see it live. Like, I didn't see it on Red Zone, but I saw it on Monday, and I'm like, that was like Mahomes. Like, that was an incredible. And the needle he threaded and not even looking. Is that's skill, right? I think that's skill. That was impressive.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Matthew Stafford's a pretty solid quarterback, man. He's had a really nice career in a lot of bad teams, but I mean, obviously Matthew Stafford can play. There's a reason he was drafted first overall and has lasted this long in the NFL. And honestly, I think when he retires, at his point of retirement, there'll be more people that will retire after him, but I think he'll retire the richest quarterback basically in NFL history at the time he retires. You look at the salaries he's gotten, up into this point and how long he's played. I think he'll retire. His career earnings are going to be up there for sure. But yeah, we can run it back here. I mean, we've talked about this Bucs passing defense a few times on the show, that since their bye or since stopping Aaron Rodgers in that Week 6 game, I mean, they really have been kind of giving. I mean, after allowing 7 passing touchdowns through 6 games, they've allowed 20 passing touchdowns over the past 8 games, multiple passing touchdowns in 7 of the past 8. On DraftKings, I know the chat's going to come get us to bring up DraftKings, but Marvin Jones is 4,900 on DraftKings. Like, for his volume and like upside, that's way too cheap. I know there's a lot of volatility there. If you just look at his game log, it's the Marvin Jones, roller coaster. He's wide receiver 35, wide receiver 5, wide receiver 50, wide receiver 3. But those weeks when he hits, I mean, he drops, haymakers, and he's got 24% of the team targets since Kenny Galladay last exit in Week 9. He's got over 20% of the team targets in 4 straight. You can hit big plays on this Bucs defense. And then even against tight ends, they've allowed some production. I mean, they're allowing a 72.6% catch rate to tight ends. That's 28th in the NFL. 5.5 receptions per game. That's 27th. It's a good bounce back spot probably for TJ Hawkinson. Stafford himself is just a little hard to trust. He didn't even make it through the game though. So just if we get a full run with Stafford, but I mean, I think there's a couple options to run it back with here for sure on the Detroit side if you want to.
Yeah, and again, worth mentioning, if you guys are watching this on a replay, this is Wednesday night. We're dealing with Wednesday night information. Things change. We're talking about a Saturday slate. So I ran my 100 optimal. I ran 100 quote-unquote optimal lineups through our RotoGrinders lineup HQ tool. What percent of Marvin Jones landed in the 100 optimal lineups?
For DraftKings scoring?
For DraftKings specific.
I would say like 80%.
100%.
Yeah, he's
Every one of them.
4,900. I mean, it's the price doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, 100%. And Leonard Fournette, by the way, 92%. What can go wrong? You mentioned Hockenson. It's basically Hockenson or Waller. You have the money for either one of them. Do you have a preference as far as Hockenson versus Waller? We haven't talked about Waller just yet. The matchup there, I believe, first time at two Hawaiian-born quarterbacks, right? Mariota and Tua.
Well, looks like Carr's going to play now.
Oh, really? Did I miss that?
Carr practiced in full today. When your backup plays really well, your groin starts feeling a little better really soon. Yeah, he did practice in full, so keep an eye on that. I mean, between the two, though, I don't think if you can afford it, obviously, like you say, like the Dean quote, we live in a world of salary cap. But if you can fit Waller in, like the ceiling gap that Waller has shown versus Hockenson this season, like isn't even remotely close. I mean, Hockenson has not really dropped like any type of haymaker game this season for fantasy. He's just getting there. Where Waller, I mean, you look at the past 3 weeks, 200 yards, 75 yards, 150 yards, at least 7 catches in each game. I mean, he's shown that he's got, big time upside to have like a really huge week, especially in a short slate too, where he's basically comparable to a lot of wide receivers on this slate. This actually, what's funny is for a 3-game slate, the tight end pool is not bad here. This is not a bad group of tight ends. I mean, we've got Gronk, who's usable. George Kittle looks like he's going to play. Outside of, Dan Arnold, like all these guys are kind of playable. Mike Gesicki looks like he's going to play. Like, so as far as a 3-game, it could be a lot worse. It could be a lot worse for tight ends.
How much is Kittle, by the way? We're gonna get Daigle back in just a second.
He's $5K on DraftKings.
It was not priced up enough on DraftKings.
What's up, Daigle? Welcome back. Yeah, so what is the word? Wednesday night, stay tuned, yada, yada. Do we assume if he's going to play, he's going to be basically a full go? Like they wouldn't bring him back in half measures, would they? Or maybe they would.
So 40-mile-per-hour winds here all of a sudden. I don't know what's happening. If I go again, I'm sorry. I'll keep jumping back on. 2, it's funny because Kyle Shanahan said that he was going to let last week's game decide what they do with the rest of their players. They lose the game, and then Kittle's practicing today, and all beat reporters said he just looks like George Kittle. Like he looks like he didn't miss a beat. So if he's healthy enough, it does sound like he's going to play. And let's be honest, $5K, especially on a mini slate with only Darren Waller to be confident in, is a pretty good option. Of course, he will come in very heavily owned if he does play. But I think it's a really good spot for the 49ers. And with their entire offense dwindled down, even from Beathard, with pretty much just Jeff Wilson at running back now. We are on 49ers and Cardinals, by the way, before I get into a spiel, right?
We're just talking about
all over the place.
All things Saturday.
Okay. So Tevin Coleman and Jarrett McKinnon have combined for 48 special team snaps compared to 22 offensive snaps in their last 2 games. Like those dudes are just afterthoughts. And that's with Raheem Mostert even banged up in that span. So I think Jeff Wilson is an amazing play, especially if you think the 49ers hang around with the Cardinals. And then Tua, I'm really interested in if we get the injury report good to go for Miami. Because remember, the 2 games prior to last week, the Dolphins passed 39 and 48 times with an increased no-huddle rate. And last week, they did not do that. 26 pass attempts to 37 running back carries, but they were also missing Devontae Parker, Jakeem Grant, and Gesicki. If they get Parker and Gesicki back, I bet we do go back to seeing them play more no-huddle and passing the ball through the air, even if Myles Gaskin's available. So that actually, his price opens up a lot of the slate as well. So that's something I'd really be interested in to monitor Miami's injury report.
I'm just looking through, and it's so weird. Like a 3-game slate, and, Hribar was talking about the tight end pool is not bad when you consider that. Lineup construction-wise, if you get Kittle back, I don't think it's completely insane in tournaments to play 2 tight ends. Like, I don't think that's nuts. I think that's something that's playable.
It's not a great receiver slate because obviously the end game, the late game, we have basically Nelson Aguilar, and then Daigle said all these banged up Miami guys, so that kind of has 2 sides of a game. And then with Arizona, we've only been able to play Hopkins. All the other guys are terrible. Like Christian Kirk is not really like, what are you going to do? Like, who wants to click the Christian Kirk button at this point?
It's not happening.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, the 49ers. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Chase Edmonds was like a game-time decision, and he out-touched Kenyon Drake. It's like, well, I don't know who to trust there.
Well, he got hurt, too.
That's true, yeah. So, yeah, it's just an odd situation, really. Definitely, what's funny, as Reeves said, maybe not confidence, but it's a deep tight end pool. Like, so you could actually be unique and differentiate in flexing a tight end because everyone's going to play the same two. You can still be different. Like I said, Tua to Gesicki, or everyone's suddenly down on Hawkinson, even though he was at least consistent until this point. Didn't explode at any point, but he was consistent until last week. So yeah, I think there are a lot of good options. The Saturday slate, honestly, is probably better than the Sunday slate.
That's not nuts. That's not total hyperbole. And yeah, let's stay tuned as far as Miami. If Parker and Gesicki are out, maybe Bowden still is a thing to some degree. How much do we still love Ayuk? Ayuk is getting tons of volume still coming his way, and what 13 more targets last week, 16 previous to that, 9 before that, which is thin, 14 and 10 before that. I presume Samuel is still out. The price on Ayuk got bumped up again, but he's been justifying it. What do you think, Reeves, as far as Ayuk? Is he still somebody you're in on?
Yeah, so since week 7, only Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams average more PPR points per game than Ayuk. The question is just these moving parts. What impacts him? We know he's still going to be the lead receiver, but if Kittle comes back, them changing over to CJ Beathard, what does those moving parts do for him? That's kind of the only question mark, and kind of yet to be determined. Because when he played with Kittle early in the season, there wasn't a lot of positive correlation, but also very different circumstances for Ayuk, the player. Being a green, rookie to where he is now, no Deebo Samuel, kind of where the offense is right now in totality. I mean, the 49ers, this team has just been ravaged the entire year. They're not even going home for Christmas, right? They're not even allowed, I don't think, right, to travel back to California for Christmas.
No, it's week 17 is there now in Arizona.
It's like a disaster for them right now.
This is a home game because Arizona's their new home, right?
And they're playing and you look at last week. I mean, they were just dreadful against the Dallas Cowboys. And since week 8, they are 30th in the NFL in rushing too. And this is a team that we think can rush on everybody in our heads. Just play these guys, and they've been awful running the ball too. Their offensive line is bad. They've just lost so many guys over the course of the season. But you never know. They might rally. Arizona has given them a ton of problems, though, the past 2 years when they were healthy and good. So I imagine Arizona is going to match up well here since like I said, they've really taken them to the limit all 3 times. Well, they beat them in week 1, and then last year when the 49ers went to the Super Bowl, Arizona took them to the limit both games. So, I mean, it does seem that Cliff at least knows what he's doing against this defensive scheme at least.
Y'all already talked about Dan Arnold, right?
His name was mentioned in passing. I don't know if we talked about him. We gave a head nod as far as this.
Kyler double stacks. Dan Arnold has become Christian Kirk. He's just the better play. The past 3 games, he's seeing the same types of targets as DeAndre Hopkins. Not as many, of course, but Kyler is all of a sudden trusting him to just lob the ball up for 50-50 chances and hopefully come down with them, as he has 50 receiving yards in 2 of his last 3 games. And if Max Williams doesn't play, who got injured last week, Dan Arnold's going to run a ton of routes and just be on the field here. So I think he's actually a great GPP option for Saturday.
In the Hoover and the vacuum, who do you guys have? Hribar, what do you have for me? Jacobs or Swift? Who do you prefer?
I'll take Jacobs, just because I don't think that this is it's really hard to draw a ceiling performance for Swift here. This is a game where I think even if he scores a touchdown, he might not get there in this game. This is a tough spot for him. His one out that is he's a good receiver, and Tampa Bay, the one weakness, they're 27th in receiving points allowed per game to backfields. They allow the fewest yards from scrimmage to running backs. It's really tough. It's really tough to see them, especially as huge dogs too, for Swift to really have a ceiling game here, where at least Jacobs, you can at least say if the game script lines up for them, Miami can be run on. He could get in the box once or twice. I'll say if you twist my arm, I'll go one up on I'll go Jacobs.
And Daigle, how much are we prioritizing Hopkins?
Oh, I would say quite highly. And I don't think it's that hard to get there, especially because if you come down off Josh Jacobs, even if you play Josh Jacobs, given what you play at flex, you can fit DeAndre Hopkins on Saturday pretty easily. So I wouldn't even worry about getting too cute with him. I just get unique around him. And It's interesting because if Fournette does come in as highly owned as we think he's going to, then the unique pivot probably would be double stacking Brady. And all you got to do is take the guys getting the money targets, right? Like Evans has 6 end zone targets. Gronk has 7 end zone targets their last 6 games with Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown's kind of interesting, but then again, we don't expect them to be down by 3 scores mid third quarter like they were last week and having to jam targets to everyone. Whereas Evans and Gronk have been consistent for a much longer period of time. So I'm pretty confident double stacking Brady, getting off Fournette, if that is the case, if you want to go that route. And then you can run back most likely with Marvin Jones, who has just been phenomenal, like at least 12 targets in 3 of his last 4 games. 8 is the outlier in that stretch. And then second in the league in air yards per game. And during that four game stretch, and he's not getting prayer yards like Jerry Jeudy. Like he's actually getting good, efficient air yards from Matthew Stafford. So pretty easy tournament stack there if you want to go that route.
Galladay's not going to happen, right? Why couldn't they rule this guy out for the season like weeks ago? Like I don't, and it's like McCaffrey. That's not happening either. Like there's no point.
No, Joe Mixon as well. Not happening.
Not happening.
Merry Christmas, guys. See y'all later.
That was the 3-game Saturday slate. Let's move on to the 10-game main slate. And yeah, I mean Atlanta KC clearly sticks out like a sore thumb because, well, I mean if you look at the totals in the slate, Atlanta KC has got a 4.5 total higher than anybody else. What Philly Dallas is 49.5. KC Atlanta is 54. And of course, those points are not delegated out evenly. I believe Casey's got a team total around 32, 33. Of course, they are super expensive, Daigle. We're expecting CEH to be out. Lev Bell will take over the reins there. Do we care or we just want the pass catchers? Let's focus on Atlanta first. What do you have for me?
Oh, Atlanta's a tough one because I did not expect them to come out and perform like that, especially Matt Ryan, basically a flawless performance against the Bucks last week. We know that the Bucks have been more of a pass funnel and seeding passing production, but for Matt Ryan to come out and basically 3 touchdowns and over 300 yards was crazy, especially without Julio Jones in that game. I don't necessarily trust Russell Gage. He does have 17 targets the past 2 weeks, and Calvin Ridley continues sustaining on a 30+% target share and over 50% of the team's air yards in this stretch. But Calvin Ridley keeps afloat. I still am somewhat concerned about Matt Ryan and the Falcons' offense in the game. Having said that, we can probably still trust them because even in a negative game script, we know this team wants to throw. 8th in the league still to this day in pass play rate when trailing. So they're going to throw the ball a lot. Calvin Ridley we can trust. And then if you have any other options, I still prefer to avoid the other guys around Matt Ryan.
What do you have for me there, Hribar?
Yeah, I'm a little more confident on the Atlanta side than Daigle is. Especially, Dean brought it up a couple weeks ago when they were playing the Dolphins, just about with Tua. I mean, you look at the Chiefs, so they haven't covered in 6 straight games. Some of these are backdoor covers, but teams are playing tight. They're not blowing anyone out. So teams are getting points on them. And there's just like when Tua came in with not a lot of weaponry. We're not excited, but because they have to pace so many points, guys are scoring points. I mean, you're talking about, look at the quarterbacks that are scoring 20+ points on the Chiefs weekly. Teddy Bridgewater, Tua, Derek Carr, Tom Brady, all these guys. Look at Drew Lock was the only one that hasn't gotten there in the past 6 games on this streak where teams have, they haven't covered games. Matt Ryan, obviously having that game last week does give us a little bit more confidence too, as well. But the Chiefs don't get a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and they're going to be throwing and they're going to have to chase points. So as long as the weather's fine, I mean, I really have no problem, especially, Matt Ryan's price. I think if you're stacking this game, it's a lot easier to go the Matt Ryan route and play Chiefs pass catchers than it is to play Mahomes with his pass catchers. With Matt Ryan, you can play Ridley. And I saw Adam Levitan tweet that this is Travis Kelce's price on DraftKings is the highest tight end price in history of DraftKings. He surpassed Gronk one year. That was like 8,100. He's 85 for good reason too, based on all his performance. And then if we have this Tyreek Hill injury, it's Wednesday, like we always say. If Tyreek's injury kind of lingers on to the weekend, and Tyreek is a Ferrari, man. Like he can't kick it into that super gear. That's kind of his bread and butter. Scoring those long touchdowns. I mean, on deep balls, he has double the passing touchdowns, receiving touchdowns than the next closest guy, which is Calvin Ridley or Justin Jefferson. and Calvin Ridley with 4. He has 8 of them. And Atlanta's a team that's been giving up a lot of big plays, and we've seen it again with Antonio Brown, and Mike Evans had his first 100-yard game in a game that Chris Godwin played in. There's a good chance I think that Atlanta can still score points. The problem, like you say, the Chiefs guys are all expensive. I don't know what we're going to do with this Tyreek injury. If we want to get on McCole Hardman, if we want to get on Demarcus Robinson and do this again, we've got this injury to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Before Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the Chiefs picked up Le'Veon Bell. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was averaging 21.3 touches per game. He wasn't getting there in the box. He wasn't getting those touchdowns, but like the opportunities for him were still there. As a fringe RB1 level. Will we get that with Le'Veon Bell? Atlanta running backs only scored 26.5% of the PPR points against the Falcons that they've allowed. That's the lowest rate in the NFL. They have been kind of a pass funnel too as well. And then on the other side, listen, if you're game blocking this game, Raheem Morris, they're gonna start Ito Smith. And he is just free. He's 4K and 5K on both sites. Am I endorsing Ito Smith? I am not. I'm endorsing his price and opportunity in this game. That's all.
So I want to talk on that because if you are fairly confident in the Falcons offense and like the spot, that's the unique way to get ownership on Ito Smith because everyone's going to play him in tournaments. Thus, you double stack with the confident options, Matt Ryan, Ito, Calvin Ridley, because even in negative game script, that's why I wanted to play Ito Smith. Not only the price, but we know he's going to be out there as a pass catcher in any come from behind negative game script. We're trending towards Todd Gurley, potentially even being healthy scratched here. Todd Gurley, Brian Hill, both contracts are up at the end of the year. They have 2 games to see what Ito Smith has, even on a rookie deal. We'll see how injury reports shake out Sunday morning, but I'm pretty sure they actually are going to feature him, and I don't care about his carries whatsoever, even though he has averaged 4.5 yards per carry over the last month. I just think he's going to be involved in the passing game. So that's a double stack. And then as we talk about weekly, winning tournaments here, it's become really, you can confidently double stack offenses and not have their quarterbacks with them because they're confident players. We've seen it time and time again with Jefferson and Cook, with T.Y. Hilton and Jonathan Taylor. So the Chiefs are also an amazing way to attack that. Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill or Mecole Hardman. So that getting Matt Ryan involved, if you are confident in him, actually is a very unique way to approach this game, especially because you have to have pieces. The Chiefs team total is 4 points higher than anyone else on Sunday. Like they are just far and away the best offense to play this week. And so I just think you have to have at least 2 pieces from their team in this slate.
Yeah, I mean, they're really interesting fades for, the tournaments as well. By the way, Ito Smith, I'm fairly certain in my DFS career, I'm like 0 for 17 and be on the right side of Ito Smith. I've never landed on the right side of him. Daigle, you want to take a shot in this? If Hill is out, and you would think KC would err on the side of caution. They're thinking about February. They're not thinking about this week necessarily. Is it Hardman? Is it Robinson? Is it Pringle season? Probably not. Watkins? Or is it just like throw some darts and who knows?
So Tyreek Hill only missed a few games last year, and in those games, it was Mecole Hardman, and he did actually average over 2 yards per route run in place of Tyreek Hill on the boundary, as opposed to when he got shoved to the inside and averaged fewer than 1 yard per route run. He's been a more efficient player in his career when he's been asked to play on the outside than the slot. I think Sammy Watkins, if he comes in under own, will also be a very good pivot. Again, I want pieces of this offense, but at 3,100, for a slate that even with Ito Smith's baked in is still begging for salary relief. Like it's so tough to go anywhere else. Like I'm totally fine with Hardman.
All right. Lev Bell, are we excited or not so much? Doesn't sound like maybe he's really excited about Lev Bell.
He's a home running back with a 10-point favorite. I mean, it's kind of one of those, like, the matchup's not good objectively, but it's like always a spot you would say you have to, right? Like you have to have some, because the spot screams like this is what lays out good fantasy. But he's got like Daigle said, the highest team total, 10-point home favorite.
Running back.
Yeah. I mean, he might pull a Fournette.
Can catch the ball.
Yeah.
Although last week's like one target was disconcerting. Like I would have liked to see more than that, but yes, can catch the ball. Well,
that was one of the things when Clyde Edwards-Helaire got drafted and everyone was talking about the fit. Since Mahomes has been with the Chiefs, they actually are not amongst like the high like league, in targeting running backs, because Mahomes can complete passes to wide receivers and tight ends. But they actually aren't like a heavy running back target team as much as people think they are. They use their backs in the passing game in the red zone, but in totality, like Mahomes is good enough to get the ball to their actual playmakers.
Where's Kelsey at in terms of receiving yards compared to the all receiving people, including wide receivers? Is he still
leads the
number
NFL,
one?
right?
I'm just curious if that narrative is still a thing. Is that still alive? I assume it is.
I mean, he's got, first of all, he has 8 catches in 7 straight games.
That's ridiculous.
That seems like a lot.
It's only happened 3 other times in league history. None were tight ends.
A couple of those were like those handoffs that are catches, with the air quotes, but we'll take them. We'll take the full point.
They even let him do an underhand throw like Mahomes this past week. They just handed it off to him, and then he tried to do the underhand hook.
Yeah.
They just don't care inside the 5, dude. They're just doing whatever they want to do.
I think they're bored. They want the playoffs to start. They're having a good time. They all seem to be enjoying whatever Reed draws up for them. Well, I guess, Rick, we were talking about Matt Ryan. I assume he's tied to Ridley. We like Ridley if you're going to pair that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't mean to ignore him or anything. I believe what's his
name?
Well,
I think on both sides of this, people are going to say, well, Atlanta's been a bad matchup for tight ends, and they've had a run here where they played some good tight ends like Darren Waller and then Gronk last week, guys that at least have been useful for fantasy, and they haven't done well. But I mean, like in the case, and on the other side, the Chiefs have been good against wide receivers, all season long too. But in the case of Ridley and Kelsey, like those are guys like you kind of like just don't really care. Like the usage is so high and their performance has been so sturdy that, I mean, it's kind of locked in the opportunity they're going to get. Could they have a bad game due to variance? Yeah, but we know the opportunities they're going to have in their offense.
All right, Daigle, you got anything else in this game, or shall we move on and talk about Philly at Dallas?
No, we always sprinkle in Hayden Hurst at the end of these conversations every week, and I don't know why. You know what you're getting. If you want to play him, whatever. I'm never going to argue against someone playing a cheap tight end, but you know what you're getting. He's going to get 1 red zone target, and he could have 1 catch on the entire day for less than 10 yards, and you better hope it's a touchdown. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I'm rooting for the guy as far as his back, his story and all that, but I don't think I'm rostering him in DFS anytime soon. Anytime soon. All right, let's talk about the second game of 2 that we're going to feature. Then we're going to talk about the slate as a whole. Philadelphia at Dallas. Oh boy, yeah, man, it's it, right? This is it. Jalen Hurts. He's the guy. All of a sudden, he's ascended to fantasy glory. He's been great in back-to-back matchups. I know he was on Head Chopper's Millionaire team. I believe we talked about Hurts last. I was on several shows, and I know we talked Hurts up a good bit. And why would we stop at Dallas? We're back on board, right, Hribar?
Yeah, I mean, there's a good reason. It's the Cowboys. Anytime we talked about it last week, and this is my brand anyways, it's literally anytime that you get any type of passing performance from these guys, the ceiling is just hard to chase. It's hard to beat a ceiling like this. And so I thought it was insane that they didn't bump we talked about last week that it was crazy that they didn't price him up higher. And you see the jump he made this week. They were like, oh, yeah. Oh, we see what's going on. But I actually think because of the circumstances that happened last week and his ceiling performance, and everyone's talking about Jalen Hurts, I actually think that it's a great leverage play to just turn to Miles Sanders this week.
Yes, I agree.
Because one, we had the fact that they had all that we talked about. They had a cluster of injuries in their secondary. No Rodney McLeod, no Avonte Maddox, Darius Slay missed the game. They allowed 11.3 yards per pass attempt to Kyler Murray, a season high, 400 passing yards. They got shredded. Can Andy Dalton do this? Are the Cowboys going to score 40 points and make Jalen Hurts chase them through the air? Because remember, the whole game they chased points.
Yeah.
Is that going to be the case this week? I have questions that is the case. Dallas did show up last week and was so functional offense, so fingers crossed. And they did show up against the Vikings a few weeks ago and had a nice back and forth game, so fingers crossed. But because Hurts' price has gone up, because everyone is excited about Jalen Hurts and everyone's talking about streaming him and he's a top 5 quarterback to play in season leagues, play him over this guy. All my questions this week have all been around Jalen Hurts. Who do I play him over? But Dallas is horrendous against the run still. 42% of the yardage they allow has come via rushing. It's the highest rate in the NFL. Miles Sanders played 100% of the snaps, had 18 of 19 backfield touches. And it's just, a spot to go away and look at Miles Sanders this week.
Yeah, I happen to agree with that, especially for tournaments. I haven't built anything out, and like you said, 44 throws last week. I will take the under on that, and everybody else take the under on that as far as 44 pass attempts, and that was because just the script of the game kind of spoke to it, and maybe it's more like the 30 against New Orleans. Of course, he was still running the ball, 11 carries.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure how many of those are actually scripted.
Oh, he's still good to play.
Yeah, yes, it's still very, very solid. I mean, do we play Dalton? Like, you don't play Dalton, do you, Hribar? Like, you talk about the Konami code, and that's your brand, and that brand has expanded so much over the last. Everybody's that's good is Konami at this point, right? Like, unless I'm missing Herbert, maybe he's like one outlier or something like that. But all the good quarterbacks are Konami at this point, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, I mean, well, like, the original like Konami code article was written about guys that like really were kind of, quote, they were just shitty passers, but like they're so no one wanted to play them, but they were good fantasy players. The original article was about Tim Tebow and Terrell Pryor and how these guys were useful. So like a great example of the Konami code is what Taysom Hill was doing, what Cam Newton was doing early in the season. Now what happened though is it's manifest, and it's just, I think, natural evolution that we just have better athletes at quarterback now. But now we're getting guys that not only can they run, they're good passers too. And when you marry both worlds together, that's when you're starting to see like these guys that just can't be paced. I go back to like Cam Newton's 2015, 2016 season when he won MVP. Like, remember, he was such an outlier because he was the only guy doing that. Like, you couldn't, like, the pocket passers, even the good ones, just couldn't even keep up with him. He was scoring mid-30s. Now we've got a handful of those guys that do that. But that's why, mid-round quarterback in season-long leagues has replaced late-round quarterback, because these pocket passers, Aaron Rodgers is the only pocket passer this year that is even coming close to, on a weekly sustainability, like matching some of these guys. There's a clear cutoff of like the top passers and what they're able to do with their legs. And it's changed, fantasy football recently, and some people are still slow to it.
I was going to say that's why Zach Areason, our buddy, is going to have to change his name to mid-round running quarterback, because like Kirk Cousins and Phillip Rivers, as good as they play, and Tom Brady to some extent, they can't crack the top 12 because they don't have legs. Like, you have to pretty much toss for 304 TDs to crack the top 12 now. Especially because even someone like Cam Newton, if he throws for less than 100 yards a game, which he's done so often this season, he can't even crack the top 10 with his legs. It comes down to doing both now because so many players are doing it. To that point, though, Jalen Hurts, even last week, 7 completions, 20 plus yards downfield. The dude just chucks the ball, let alone 29 carries the past 2 games. So it's everything we like in a quarterback in an up-tempo matchup in a game that the Eagles team total has also been increasing throughout the entire week. The largest increase of any team this week on Sunday slate. So yeah, you have to like them. And Miles Sanders. That was actually going to be my leverage conversation as well.
I assume this game has like playoff implications, which is I don't have a favorite team.
Yeah, Dallas is not eliminated
somehow,
which is just
it's basically they're not eliminated, but it's hard. It's very hard for all of them to get in behind Washington if Washington doesn't take the crown. But like, Washington can take the divisional crown this week, so hopefully we just put everyone else out of their misery, because they don't like Colt McCoy in the playoffs. We're not getting there, buddy.
Oh no, I wanted to keep going. Let's draw it out as long as possible. I'm a fan of chaos when it's harmless chaos. The price is obviously bumped up for the running back situation here as far as Dallas, where Pollard is 6'5" on DK, it'll be 6'3" on FanDuel. Daigle, is there still some value in that price? Is he still worth a look if we assume that Elliott doesn't play again this week? Or again, who knows? It's Wednesday.
Oh, if we assume Elliott doesn't play, absolutely. I mean, they didn't even give another running back target to anyone else. The only other guy they had active behind him was Rico Dowdle, who profiled as more of a fullback out of TCU. So, like, he's not even an option. It's just strictly Tony Pollard. My one concern, even though I liked Pollard in season long last week, was that it's just a bad situation. Like, it's still a bad offense behind a bad offensive line. And he did average under 2.5 yards per carry up until his 40-yard pinwheeling touchdown. But that's what he can do when he's getting all the touches. Like, it only takes one because he's such an explosive player, and honestly much more explosive than Zeke this year. His 31 fantasy points were more than Zeke has scored in any game this year, and Zeke is still 5th in the entire league among running backs in total touches. So yes, if Zeke is definitely out, of course you're playing Pollard. Like, that's, in my opinion, is not cheap enough.
And this is not a DFS.
He did practice today.
Oh. And I think he's going to play, by the way. That's assume he's going to be out, but I do actually think he's going to play. And if that's the case, I would imagine he out-touches Pollard because he's still the $90 million elephant in the room. Like McCarthy, when he agreed to coach his team, agreed that they will give the touches to Zeke. They are not getting away from that contract at all, no matter how much we want it to happen. Having said that, I bet Pollard still outperforms and outscores Zeke on fewer touches, but it doesn't matter because now it's 6,500 and that's not even really worth it.
Can't do it.
The thing that's frustrating is that when you watch Pollard last week and how they used him, they don't use Elliott like that at all.
Nope.
And granted, there's a little bit of different skill set, but they're throwing wheel routes to Tony Pollard and getting him downfield. His first touchdown, they have him, kind of come in motion. They're doing a lot of things. Dalton missed him on a wide open play that could have been a huge gain too. But they're just not using Zeke like that at all. And there's just no explosive plays, like Daigle said. But I do expect him to play. Unlike last week where we got that free square, a free gift. He unlocked so much when Zeke was out. I had like a lineup I wanted to play in my head and couldn't get there. And the second he was out, I was like, yes, I could do this. And we got there.
A couple things. So it's interesting last week, if you looked at, the high buy-ins as opposed to the low buy-ins, the difference in ownership of Pollard was just drastic.
Because it was so late. The people,
Yeah.
the general public is, it's same thing with late swapping. Like he was declared inactive at inactive. So you had 90 minutes to alter your approach. How many people are doing that? Whether they're doing, Sunday church or whatever, getting stuff with the family and just waiting for kickoff. If you're on the West Coast, it's the morning still, so I mean.
And admittedly, like I galaxy brained it. I didn't play him, but I still played Tannehill to get off Henry and double stacked him with Corey Davis and Jonnu, and then had Marvin Jones as the run back. So I still did really well, but the obvious play would have been Tony Pollard over Gus Edwards, guess who played him. So
since it's the same game, I asked this question on Twitter. This has nothing to do with DFS, but I'm just curious. And obviously there's a money difference as well too. You have to take one of these two contracts. You got to take one of two. You got to take Wentz or you got to take Elliott. Which one are you taking?
Oh, it's Wentz for me.
Yeah, probably. You have to, right? Because it's like
he's
tradable.
No, you're not playing him.
You can't play the backup that much.
But people need quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So I'll easily take him. People need quarterbacks and the NFL stance. People don't need running backs.
Also, like we all know that like Frank Reich might grow. Phillip Rivers has 1-2 years left at most. We know Rivers is going there, right? Like it's already decided. Oh, I'm sorry, not Rivers. Wentz is going there for sure.
Reunion of sorts. All right, just give me this before we move on. Both of you guys, Daigle, you go first. Your favorite receiver on both these teams, Philadelphia and Dallas. Trick questions.
Oh, this actually. Okay, can I say Dallas Goedert, or are we talking like actual receiver?
Show anybody that can catch a football.
All right, screw me. Let's burn right here. Alshon Jeffrey is the best play among Philly's receivers. I know it's terrible. Led the receivers in routes run, had at least 50 yards of DPIs left on the field because Jalen Reagor, unlike us, does not judge. He looks around in his cast and he just sees players running deep. He doesn't give a damn at all. And he was just chunking them to Jeffrey, who was drawing flags. So Jeffrey's still a deep threat among this offense. And Zach Ertz and Jeffrey actually led the team in routes run because also like Hurts, Peterson doesn't see talented players either. He just plays his oldest veterans and he runs them out there. So I think Jeffrey's fine if you want to get very unique. Not saying he's going to be my player pool, but that would be the player I pick for the Eagles. And then for the Cowboys, it is still Amari Cooper. CeeDee Lamb, slightly more usage, more end zone targets, but also remember it took an onside kick for him to really get there.
All right. See Alshon Jeffrey and raise him. Can you top that, Hribar?
You can't.
No. Well, remember, he got there because Reagor got hurt at the end of the game. They were fully featured Reagor for the first time, and then he got hurt at the end of the game and came out, and that the Alshon started getting a lot more run in sets there. But I kind of we have to follow the injury reports this week with this situation for two spots. One, we need to know if Darius Slay is going to play. Darius Slay has just bagged Amari Cooper the last 2 years, just straight bagged him. Not even been close. And Amari,
that's a thing?
It's true.
Okay.
5 yards last time they played. Last year, 3 for 39. And then Amari also in his career just against press corners that's his like one bugaboo. Like when he plays physical press corners, he hasn't been good. Then we've got Michael Gallup's injury. They say it's not serious, but again, we're at this point of the season. Are they going to force him to play? We don't know. So you have to follow this hit pointer that he had and exit the game. If Darius Slay plays, and Michael Gallup doesn't play, then that leaves a runway for CeeDee Lamb to do something. Will it be good? I don't know, but at least there's a way you can say you could get there that way.
I thought you were going to say it's the runway for Noah Brown, 6 targets and 1 catch. I was like, no, please don't say that.
But I mean, this Eagles secondary, right? We're where we were last year with this Eagles secondary. If Slate doesn't play, and we've seen it happen last week, I was the only thing I was on last week was, this Eagles secondary is going to get shredded. They're absolutely going to get shredded. And if Slate doesn't play again, like, they just don't have the bodies. We're in a few spots like this. Jacksonville's been like this, and we'll talk about Allen Robinson, I'm sure. Jacksonville's been like this the entire back half of the season. They lost 3 starting cornerbacks. Denver right now has lost 5 cornerbacks the past 3 weeks. And what happened to them Saturday? What happened to them Saturday? They got absolutely demolished. They couldn't stop anyone through the air. Jake Kumro is running wide open down the field. Like we're in this part of the season where you've got all these cluster injuries just really impacting like a lot is happening. And if people aren't going to be on it, you have to pay attention to some of the stuff. So if Slay is out again, and then this is a problem, like, we at least have to dabble on the Cowboys passing game.
Yeah, well, let's go there. You mentioned, let's pick on Denver as an option. Herbert, of course, going back against at home versus Denver this week. You got Lamar versus the Giants, Watson versus Cincy. If Cincy can keep up, that can be a fun game for sure. They can somehow find a way. And then, Trubisky against Jacksonville. Hribar, the day Jacksonville's not going to win or even attempt to. James Robinson is not playing this week, right? I know running backs don't matter, but just in case they might just a little bit, he's not playing, right? It's no chance. They wrapped up the number 1. They're good to go.
They did say today, Doug Marrone did say that they were going to rest him in practice with the intent of playing, that he was going to play. He's chasing that all-time record that for yards from scrimmage for an undrafted player. He's that is within his grasp. So I think that is something he definitely would want, and that might be something that at least they would acquiesce in this season of terribleness, in design terribleness, to be fair. But I mean, Trubisky is in a great spot, like you said. I mean, you look at the Bears under Mitchell Trubisky. The Bears have scored a touchdown in 32% of their offensive possessions, just 16% under Nick Foles. So doubled him up there. 18% of Mitchell Trubisky's pass attempts have come inside the red zone. That's the highest rate in the NFL. And then he is awesome on short to intermediate throws so far this season. He's 3rd in the NFL in quarterback rating on throws within 15 yards, 72% completion rate, 13 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Jaguars are 31st in passing points for fantasy allowed on those pass attempts. Over the past 2 weeks, Mitchell Trubisky, the past 3 weeks, I should say, has faced the teams that are 30th and 32nd in Detroit and Houston as well, and been hyper efficient. So I mean, there's a legit, we're going to close 2020 with like a legit Bears onslaught because, David Montgomery has been awesome. And then Allen Robinson's in a great revenge game spot in the spot we said. And then the other quarterback that just to bring up is Baker Mayfield. It's a bummer that Quinnen Williams is out. Quinnen Williams being out, I think does, help the Browns run the ball a little bit more effectively. And obviously, the Jets have, we talked about them. They've been good against the run. They are good against the run defense. They force teams to throw on them. They don't give up a lot of big plays on the ground. They've only allowed 2, running back touchdowns, since week 6 on the ground. And Baker's been hot. And Baker's been hot against teams that really aren't good. And it's another team that really isn't good. Outside of the COVID Ravens, that's like the best paper defense he's faced over this extreme hot streak where he's thrown for 308 yards per game the past 4 weeks, 10 touchdowns to 1 interception. And the Jets are, dead last in pass defense EPA, and they're 31st in passing points allowed per game. So to have Baker Mayfield in another spot where they can just line up, and they've shown that they're willing to lead with the pass first against these teams, like they did against the Jaguars, like they did against the Titans. So, it might not be a lot in the second half of Baker, but I think the Browns are definitely going to build that lead through the passing game.
All right, John, anything you want to add as far as those guys that are thrown out there? Anybody else you want to add to the pool as far as quarterbacks?
Justin Herbert's the only other one I will definitely have in my pool, although I'm waiting to see how the Chargers injury report shakes out. We talked about Josh Allen's scorching the Broncos 5th and 6th string corners, which they're going to be on again this week for 350 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. Didn't even need or ask him to run the ball just because he didn't have to. And Herbert should be in the same situation. This total is decreasing, but I still keep hitting it for better or worse. And I still like it to go well over because also Drew Lock, we know he wanted to go downfield, but he hasn't done that the past 2 games. He's only chucked 3 attempts 20 plus yards downfield in the past 2 weeks, whereas we know he's at least better in the shallow and intermediate level of the field. And if we don't get Keenan Allen, although I'd love to see Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler at full health, 10 days removed from an island game and injury, thus reducing their ownership, and I can play them with Justin Herbert. Jalen Guyton's still an impressive player, 4.35 40 at his pro day. He had the 6th highest spark score among his wide receiver draft class last year in 2019. So I just think there's still good players, Tyron Johnson as well. You can play with Justin Herbert for cheap, and no one's going to be on this game, despite the fact that Herbert could easily scorch them.
It's a weird week, by the way. Running back, we're looking at, assuming McCaffrey doesn't play, Chubb and Montgomery are like the 2 most expensive running backs in the slate. And you consider all the good running backs are playing all throughout
and
the week.
Montgomery isn't even like, they didn't price Montgomery enough. Like, the dude had 33 touches. He's like, he keeps on rattling off good games because of the schedule, of course, but like he's still performing every single week. And yet on DraftKings, like for a guy who catches balls, 7,700? That's crazy.
There is still some sticker shock to that name. Like, again, people wouldn't pay $5K like a month and a half ago. And I get it. It also kind of sort of makes sense here. You want to start? Feel free. John, give us the running back rundown. Who's popping for you? Feel free to give more as far as Montgomery, but what else do you have on your list that you're eyeing as far as, thin options, at least at the top?
I mean, that was it for Montgomery. They only asked Trubisky to throw 21 times last week. And against the Jaguars, completely decimated defense that we should fully expect to throw in the towel. Of course, compete to win, but just throwing the towel on talent. They have now in the driver's seat for Trevor Lawrence. They're done. So maybe they just asked Montgomery to carry 30 plus times again. So he's a terrific play. And maybe he won't even have ownership again this week. Jonathan Taylor didn't get the Steelers bump, even though he probably should have. But the fact is, he's still being used over Nyheim Hines significantly, and his salary only reduced $100 against Pittsburgh. Maybe it's not the best matchup, and maybe that is still too cheap, although Montgomery's the better player, but I think he should at least be considered in player pools. I already talked about Austin Eckler, of course, especially off 10 days of injury. Just a great player who, remember, led the league, led the Chargers as well in targets from the running back position prior to last week's game when he was limited and splitting with Kalen Ballage. And then if you want to figure out the Rams situation, I would imagine it's Darrell Henderson. Malcolm Brown out-snapped Henderson last week. And then again, this depends what you think game script will do. I think the Rams outright beat the Seahawks. Maybe Reeves has a lean here, but if that's the case and they at least compete, it would be Darrell Henderson over Brown because Brown is still just the pass catching back. You would take that, Reeves, as far as the Rams backfield? No makers, obviously.
Well, I mean, under McVay, they've always beaten Seattle. They have one loss, a 1-point loss on a Thursday night game. They've kind of had their number, especially defensively, just because where the Rams excel defensively is where Russell Wilson at his best, on those deep throws. And they really stymied him downfield in that first matchup. He completed just 2 of 9 balls of 15 yards or further downfield. That's where the Rams are the best. They've only allowed 1 touchdown pass on those throws all season. So they do stymie them a little bit. It does come down to just, they split those guys up on, first early downs with Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown in passing situations. Darrell Henderson has 7 touches on third down all season this year, where Malcolm Brown has 32% of his touches on third down. So we'd still probably see that a little bit. And Seattle's actually a pretty decent run defense too. But I think that the Rams get back on trying to space that out. I tried to look at Darrell Henderson earlier in the week, and maybe I'll go back to him. But there's so many guys pricing that mid-range, like we talked about, Le'Veon Bell, even underneath, Ito Smith as like a deep tournament dart.
He's probably a better FanDuel play, honestly, since, like you said, we know he's not going to play much on third down.
J.K. Dobbins, whatever he's doing there. Gus Edwards has still been too effective to really kind of give him a run when he's not catching passes, to really give him a high ceiling. And then I think David Johnson, too, is kind of interesting, just because huge home favorite against the team that can't stop the run against the Bengals. I mean, even in that game on Monday night, they allowed 90-plus yards and a touchdown to Benny Snell. I don't think anything receiving wise that David Johnson did against the Colts is real. He had just, I wouldn't stock that at all. I just mean he's another one of these guys. They said, if you just look at the spot, he's a 9-point home favorite against a team that's really bad against the run. That's just I'll just hold my nose and put that guy in on some over ownership of projections and see what happens.
You mentioned Snell, by the way. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was saying, and yet Gio's probably going to come in higher owned than David Johnson just because he's cheap against the Texans, even though it's a horrendous spot and he just came off an island game with 25 carries that are also I don't put any stock in whatsoever.
Yeah, like I don't understand that one because the previous game he fumbled like in the first play and he basically disappeared and he came back in prime time and they let him shine and he got 2 touchdowns and good for him, and they didn't really have much behind him in Williams and Pirine, I suppose, but I don't know what Cincinnati's doing as far as their running back situation.
They were upset a 24-year-old danced on paint pregame, apparently. That was the motivation.
So the name Snell was mentioned, and he's reasonably cheap. He had a good game in that offense for Pittsburgh, which is just looking dreadful these days. 5.3 on DK. I think he's like 5.4 or 5.5 on FanDuel. Is Snell kind of sort of interesting as a low to mid tier guy, or I'm assuming even if Connor's back, I guess it's a mess because they have McFarland that kind of works his way into it. Do we want any part of that?
He's not going to be in my pool, but like McFarland, they weren't factors. Snell still had 18 to 20 carries, but you basically, his skill set, you have to hope he has 2 touchdowns. Not even one will really get you there.
Oh, man. I know it's just a 10-game slate, but it feels like the thinnest running back pool we've had. I want to say the entire season. Yep. It's rough, man. It might be one of those weeks where, and it's always uncomfortable for me, but playing, you guys mentioned it, I think somebody mentioned it earlier, as far as playing a receiver in the utility spot, it might be that week. And that's a good segue. Let's get the receivers there, Hribar. And hey, you mentioned it, Allen Robinson's revenge game, and it's a fabulous matchup there against Jacksonville. And we talk about the Rams running backs, but I think more appealing, probably more likely, is to decide. Now, good luck figuring out if it's Woods or Kupp, but one of them gets there, maybe both. Who knows? Start there, Robinson and the Rams receivers. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Robinson's been, a really solid. He's had a great floor all season. He's got, a 12-game streak of double-digit PPR points, but he's hit 100 yards in just one of his past 10 games. Not a lot of ceiling spike weeks from Allen Robinson. This would be a spot to potentially get one. I mean, since week 9, when the Jaguars started losing cornerbacks left and right, wide receiver ones against them, Kenny Galladay, 105 yards, Keenan Allen, 10 for 125, Will Fuller, 100 yards and a touchdown, Devontae Adams, 8 catches and a touchdown, Deontay Johnson, 12 catches, 100 yards, Jarvis Landry, 8 for 143 and 1, Justin Jefferson, 9 for 121 and 1, AJ Brown, 7, 112 and 1, and even last week, Marquise Brown, 6 for 98. They don't have any bodies on the back end to stop anybody through the air. So pretty easy spot with his type of, target level. He has trickled up a little bit on both sites the past few weeks, but still worth it, I think, where he's priced. As far as the Rams go, I mean, it has been, we have largely known who's getting there. It's been, Bob. You look at Cooper Kupp, he's got just 3 touchdowns on the season. He scored 1 touchdown in his past 10 games. He's been a wide receiver 2 or better in fantasy in just 4 games this season. So, I mean, he's not really been the guy that's offering you a lot. The matchup does favor him, though. Seattle has been a lot worse to more interior options. He did have more yards than Woods when these guys played earlier in the season when we were targeting Seattle on a weekly basis. Some strength of schedule has helped Seattle out, but to be fair to them, they also haven't let those guys get over on him either. It's like one of those things, like we've talked about David Montgomery, right? Like his schedule has helped him out, but David Montgomery's also smashed in those games. It's not like he's barely getting by. So it's a positive, one, when you exploit a good matchup. We want guys that when they have these great matchups that we look at, like when we talk about Miles Sanders earlier, we want guys that when they have great matchups to just obliterate them. And that's what David Montgomery's done. And for Seattle to at least not allow these vagabonds to get over on him is at least a signal that they have still improved as well as, being helped out. But I mean, it's, all year though, it's been Woods over Kupp. He gets more targets. He's got 29% of the team targets over the past 5 games. He already has matched his career high in touchdowns. I mean, it's been him. The matchup would favor Kupp if you want to go there, but then we're back to trusting Goff. We'll see, kind of what happens there. But I think Kupp being the cheaper guy and probably being worse all year helps him to be the leverage guy, but that's kind of where we are right now.
Daigle, feel free to add on throw some more guys into the conversation because I think that was a lot pretty well said, but I'm sure you have a pool of receivers we're looking at this week.
Not too many, but I will say Landry sticks out, especially with this high team total. We talked about Baker being a good play and perhaps a pivot off Nick Chubb, especially with Quinnen Williams declared out. Landry on FanDuel is 700 more than Rashad Higgins, clearly the better play. But on DraftKings, Higgins is 2,100 cheaper. So I would argue Higgins is the much better play. He's still second on the team in target share, red zone opportunities, and end zone looks behind Landry the past month since Cleveland got past that 3-game weather storm stretch. So Higgins' role still seems here to stay, especially since we know the Browns will attack and have success most likely through the air. Jameson Crowder will be my favorite run back. Still ran the third most routes for the team last week, but continued that rapport with Sam Darnold, finally back at full health, it seems, and doubling up the next closest receiver in targets, 8-4. And then Deshaun Watson's played the Bengals, and Kiki QT is doing nothing but reaching his floor every single week. So why not? DraftKings and FanDuel aren't moving his salary really, although he is a much better play on DraftKings. So yeah, I like QT as well. He leads the team in red zone and end zone targets since Will Fuller was suspended last 3 games.
Yeah, Cooks is 7K now on FanDuel and 6-1 for QT, so they bumped up a little bit. You guys remember the Seattle Seahawks? You guys remember them?
No.
No.
What happened? Like they used to be like, wasn't Russ supposed to be the MVP like 2 months ago? Wasn't that supposed to happen too?
Still going to go another year without getting an MVP vote.
Yep.
Man.
Last week had a season low in air yards per attempt. Like they were just trying to get the ball out of his hand as quickly as possible. And I mean, Aaron Donald single-handedly is the same matchup, the same Washington front seven. So I would imagine they do that again. They're just going to dump the ball off, making DK and Lockett just useless still.
T. Higgins looks like a guy that can be kind of an interesting, especially as a run back. I don't know if it helps him or hurts him if Boyd is out. I guess he would get more throws his way, but the efficiency might take a hit. If you have a thought on that, feel free by all means. And I think Terry McLaurin. I mean, we got to pick on Carolina, don't we, Hribar?
Yeah, I mean, McLaurin bounced back. You know, his target share versus Haskins versus Alex Smith is, 4% higher. The thing about Terry McLaurin, though, 3 touchdowns all year, man. I mean, they're all long touchdowns. There are no freebies. There are no end zone targets to really be had. I think that's the biggest problem with Terry McLaurin at his price is there's not a lot of touchdown upside for him. There hasn't been so far. I mean, maybe this is the week you play on that variance, like we talked about for the show about weighting touchdowns. But the fact that they are weighted, does hurt him in that regard. I love the Higgins call. He actually has more yardage than Landry in 5 of their past 7 games, despite the target disparity. So definitely on DraftKings, I think Rashard Higgins is a really interesting play. We talked about just the Seattle matchup versus the Rams, though. It's just a really bad matchup. Like where the Rams are excellent is defending the vertical pass. And that's where you would want to play DK Metcalf. And that's where you would want to play Tyler Lockett. And it's just not that exciting. And where's the upside? Where's it been? Outside of that game against the Jets where Russ had the 4 touchdowns, I mean, he hasn't gotten there. So it's really hard to say. I don't think it's a week I'll even be entertaining playing DK Metcalf as a contrarian play because I think that's really all he is. QT, good play. We talked about the Chiefs guys. I mean, that's kind of where we are. The Steelers guys, I mean, if you want to keep just playing the volume, I mean, listen, I mean, it seems like everyone wants to dunk on Deontay Johnson, and that's fine, but dude keeps getting 12 targets a game, and they're playing a team that only plays cover 2, and they only play zone coverage. So, I mean, guess what's going to happen? Him and Juju are going to have a bunch of targets again. So, I mean, you can really count on, I think, Deontay Johnson getting just a slew of targets again in the zone-based defense that the Colts are on.
And on Haskins as well, maybe game script dictates what happens here, but I can't imagine he'll be afforded 55 pass attempts again. It took 55 pass attempts. He didn't get to 300 yards, and then he just shoved Thomas and McLaurin double-digit targets. So I just and McKissick, by the way. So I just can't imagine that kind of game script working itself out again either.
Yeah, he took the first team reps on Wednesday for what it's worth. Alex Smith, who really knows,
had a good time on the weekend and took the first team reps. He's living the life,
hanging out with James Harden somewhere. So let's pivot to tight end. As always, it's Travis Kelce's much easier to get on FanDuel than he is on DK. I ran my optimals and 48% on FanDuel and 17% on DK. Again, this is on Wednesday night. Lots of stuff happens. Let's talk for DK specifically here, Daigle. You mentioned Dallas Goedert, like that. He's no Alshon Jeffrey, but he's also a pass catching receiver there for Philadelphia. Pretty reasonable price. Fant finally looked good. Like how that Fant finally had his moment, like he's been dealing with injuries and goofy stuff, and he left the game a couple weeks ago because he was not feeling well. I played way too much Komet last week. I feel like there might be some flop lag there against Jacksonville, and I don't want to miss out on it. Some FOMO there. And I still believe Akins. Like I think Jordan Akins is cheap enough. I think he's kind of sort of so interesting there against Cincinnati. Sort through it as far as the tight ends. What is your read?
Not too big of a pull this week, to be honest. You hit on one. Dallas Goedert, I think, is a great stack with Jalen Hurts if you go that route. If only because he's seen at least 6 targets in 6 consecutive games and 14 targets the past 2 weeks from Jalen Hurts. He's still on the field despite the fact he's running fewer routes than Zach Ertz. And it's more or less that Zach Ertz is actually opening up the field for Goddard because he's still been successful and has standalone value as a top 12 tight end when Ertz is on the field. So I think that's fine. I'll probably still, don't get me wrong, Kelsey's so expensive on DK. We've already talked about him, but I'm still very interested to try to find a way up to him. And then Noah Fant, I think, is a great run back if you play Justin Herbert or any Chargers skinny stacks. Like Drew Lock, like I said, has not been throwing deep the past few games, but he is accurate underneath the intermediate level of the field where Fant runs those crossing routes underneath, and he's just targeting Fant. Unlike Judy and the rest of these guys who are struggling from prayer yards, Fant is actually getting accurate targets and getting fed heavily. So I like Fant a lot this week as well. I will say one caveat. I think a lot of people want to play, I could be wrong here, Austin Hooper. But remember that Austin Hooper had 9 targets in 3 games prior to last week and then emerged last week with 6 targets. It's just a fake target tree. So I would not buy into that.
They still have 3 tight ends or pass catchers there in Cleveland too. I guess it's worth noting. I did not check the routes run and all that, but Njoku, as far as I know, is still a thing. And I guess Harrison Bryant is still a person and available. Is it you're saying there's some goofy variants? Is that for the past month, once they escaped that weather run, it seemed like Baker started targeting wide receivers as a whole more and getting away from all of his tight ends. And Hooper popped up last week, I know, and he's cheap on DK, but that's the one, like I said, every week I fight against one person against the models. That's my model person I'm fighting against this week. Anybody you're fighting against there, Hribar? Is there anybody that we didn't miss or we didn't focus on as far as tight ends? Andrew Thomas, we don't think Thomas is going to repeat all those targets again. And he did get a price bump as well, too. We got to finish strong somehow. This is
no.
With this pool of names.
Now we do it every week, man. It's literally, especially like we said, most of the adequate tight ends are on Saturday. And it's Kelsey and a big jump this week, because you've got Andrews. And Andrews, I think, is fine if you want to go to him, but we're going to be paying for these other spots because there's not a lot of value at the other positions that we feel confident in. Unless one of these running back spots opens up for us that we feel really good about, but we'll see. And even at receivers, I feel like there's not a great cheap wide receiver week. So especially on a site like DraftKings, you've got Hooper at 3.5, Komet at 3. It's hard to make an argument for either one, but at least at 3 and 3.5, you can at least, kind of just hold your candle on some targets and saying there's a chance they can get double-digit points and maybe fall in the end zone. But Logan Thomas got a lot of targets the last 3 games, but I don't like that 6K and 4.9. I don't really like that area of pay. I don't want to allocate my salary, that kind of salary, to a tight end if I'm not going to have real confidence in the guy being good.
That's pretty much where I'm at. I think it's I'm generally high-low when it comes to tight end. And because the low to mid-tier guys, they're all basically kind of sort of the same. They're all just not Travis Kelce. All right. That's the show. We appreciate you guys watching. Do hit the like button, subscribe, the whole deal, turn on notifications, and follow these guys. They are just for the one person out there that's watching, John, tell the people where they can find your stuff, where they can find you on Twitter, the whole deal.
Merry Christmas. I can't imagine you don't know where to find me in week 16, but just in case, at Daigle on Twitter, RotoWorld Football Podcast, and of course, RotoWorld.com, and always here on Wednesday night with my friends.
Rich?
Yep, sharpfootballanalysis.com. We're wrapping up the season, getting into the playoffs. Postseason stuff will all be free this year, all the worksheet write-ups and game write-ups and stuff, so look forward to that when we clear these 2 weeks. And then really just happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, I second that as well. We're at third that happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever y'all celebrate. Enjoy yourself. Everybody stay safe. Have a good time. Enjoy your football. Enjoy your week. That was Rich. That was John. I was Dean. This was football. Thanks for watching. We're out of here. Holler.